Good afternoon. This is Joe Papano from FiberLink Communications. Thanks for joining us on our webinar today. We are pleased to have Philippe Winthrop from the Enterprise Mobility Foundation join us today. For those of you who don't know Philippe, he's truly a thought leader in enterprise mobility, and it's really our pleasure to have him today. So Philippe, thank you very much for joining us.
Hello. My name is Philippe Winthrop, and I'm the Managing Director of the Enterprise Mobility Foundation. I'm here today to talk to you about how you can improve your mobile device management success with the cloud. For those of you who are not familiar with the Enterprise Mobility Foundation, it is the think tank that is behind the Enterprise Mobility Forum. And the Enterprise Mobility Forum is the fastest and largest social network dedicated to enterprise mobility, providing you blogging from subject matter experts, as well as free downloadable research and a wide variety of other resources, plus an entire social networking component wholly dedicated to enterprise mobility. Before we get to today's discussion, let's take a quick walk down memory lane. Let's look back, in fact, at 1973, the year that Dr. Martin Cooper at Motorola first invented the cell phone. Obviously, a lot has changed since then. But if you look then in the early 90s, that was when we were actually able to finally have very portable mobile devices. And when you then look at today, we find that these devices are no longer phones, but in fact microcomputers that are able to be accessing the internet, email, and various other mobile applications, really providing us now a mobile desktop to access the internet wherever and whenever we want to. And because of the consumerization of enterprise mobility and mobility in general, clearly today we find that the two most popular platforms are going to be Apple's iOS platform and Google's Android. But that doesn't mean that within the workplace and even from a consumer perspective, we don't still continue to see BlackBerry devices, Windows Phone devices, as well as Palm HP WebOS, and even globally speaking, Symbian from Nokia. Mobility, however, is much more today than just a smartphone. We have WiMAX, we have LTE for 4G. We now find more and more devices are having 802.11n for Wi-Fi built into those smart pads and smartphones. And of course, data cards and netbooks are still around, meaning that organizations and individuals today have more options in terms of how they can be mobilely connected than ever before. That's why I'm here today to talk to you about mobile platforms in the enterprise, as well as the impact of the mobile cloud, and specifically then touching upon mobility management and mobility policies. So let's jump right into mobile platforms. At the very end of 2010, the Enterprise Mobility Foundation partnered with research firm Strategy Analytics to conduct a survey of fierce mobile IT end users to learn more about what they were looking at and what their concerns were around mobility within the workplace. And one of the questions obviously that we asked was, what kind of mobile platforms were they supporting? And you can see here, looking at the data from December 2010, that Android and iOS or iPhone and iPad have really jumped considerably within that marketplace, especially as compared to just 12 months prior in January 2010. What's also interesting to note is that out of nowhere, literally, in terms of being there for just basically 2 months, the support for Windows Phone 7 is already starting to filter into the workplace, with 15% of organizations responding that they're already supporting that platform. What this shows right now is already that there's a very broad mix of platforms that organizations are having to support because of the fact that the individuals within those organizations are bringing in whichever platform is best suited for their needs. We also asked organizations what they were planning on supporting moving forward in 2011. And what you can see here is, apart from Symbian and WebOS, that organizations are going to be supporting 4 major platforms within the workplace, whether it be Android, BlackBerry, iOS, and Windows Phone 7. And clearly what this shows overall is that there's going to be a broad mix of mobile devices and mobile platforms within each and every workplace. The key takeaway here is that at the end of the day, IT departments are going to have to continue supporting the platforms and devices that the workforces are asking for. And to no one's surprise, the old days of having a 100% homogeneous environment, meaning we are quote-unquote a BlackBerry shop or we are a Windows Mobile shop, is gone. Clearly, when you see the fantastic growth that both Apple and Android have experienced in the last couple of years, one would think that they will be the two dominant platforms. But the converse says that they weren't there 2 years ago. So the question becomes, which platform will ultimately dominate in the enterprise? The answer is, unfortunately, who knows? So what we can suggest to you today is do not get stuck in analysis paralysis and focus instead not on just one platform, but instead the platforms that work best for your workforce. And assume that today is just like tomorrow and not try to plan out for 18 to 24 months from now, because with the changing marketplace, the changes within enterprise mobility are so quick and so frequent that it's really impossible to be able to foretell what's going to be happening in 2 to 3 years and what the dominant platforms are going to be. Instead, what we do recommend is that you leverage tools that are going to provide you as much flexibility to be able to have visibility on those assets, as well as support the broadest array of not only operating systems, not only devices, but most importantly, people. So now let's talk a little bit about the mobile cloud. There's no question that the cloud has become one of the most important paradigm shifts in IT in the last decade. And in fact, when you look at it from a business perspective, ABI research predicts that by 2015, over 240 million business people will be leveraging cloud computing in one fashion or another. Now, what this also has an impact on is the application paradigm, moving to HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. But from a mobile perspective, how is that also going to impact mobile enterprise application platforms? And ultimately, what will be the definition of a quote-unquote rich application? But the more important question in my mind is, with the emergence of the cloud, with having all of these HTML5 web-based applications, will the mobile operating system actually matter? Now, while the cloud shows certainly a lot of promise for IT in general, there are obviously going to be a lot of challenges moving forward as well, whether it be for interoperability, as well as having to deal with both public and private clouds. Then organizations are also going to have to think about encryption and MDM. And I'm not talking here about mobile device management, but instead master data management. How is all that data going to be federated across the various clouds, across the various devices that are going to be accessing that information? Another issue is going to be the fact that you're going to ultimately, from an application perspective, have to deal with some level of compromise because of the fact that from a cloud perspective, you're going to have uniformity versus unique differentiation based upon the different platforms. Also, from a mobile perspective, you're going to have to make sure that the applications that you're developing are not going to be using up so much data because of the fact that nowadays the unlimited data plans are pretty much gone. What I will say, however, is that when you're comparing your fixed versus your mobile cloud strategy, there should be no difference whatsoever between the two. One of the things, however, that you're also going to have to take into account is that the device liability, whether it's an individual or corporate liable device, that's going to play into question in terms of how you're going to be actually federating the data that's going to be passing through those devices. Now, one of the opportunities, however, is to be able to look at how this is going to impact mobility management. So let's just do that right now and talk about mobility management. The Enterprise Mobility Foundation has created an enterprise mobility management framework which actually looks at 9 different facets of what mobility management includes, all the way from procurement and provisioning through device, application, and service management, as well as including security, expense management, end user support, and device retirement and replacement. For those of you who have been in IT long enough, this should sound very familiar to you in terms of an overall lifecycle management approach. And in fact, it is just that, because we believe at the Enterprise Mobility Foundation that mobile devices and mobility management as a whole should be managed in the traditional IT lifecycle management approach. Now, whilst most organizations, generally speaking, have an understanding of what IT lifecycle management is, unfortunately, the data from the Strategy Analytics Survey that was conducted in December 2010 shows that less than 50% of organizations typically have any of these lifecycle management functions for their mobile devices. That said, organizations are increasingly understanding the importance of having this lifecycle management approach towards mobility deployments. And in fact, the data from the Strategy Analytics Survey shows that organizations are planning on increasing significantly their adoption of these various components of mobility management within their workplace. However, the flip side of this is that even by the end of this coming year, one can argue that typically 30% of organizations will not be deploying these kinds of solutions. And we at the Enterprise Mobility Foundation do believe that this is a critical mistake on their part because of the fact that there are a number of possible repercussions that can come from not being able to proactively manage your mobility deployments. In the past year alone, we've already seen some of the potential repercussions of not having mobility management solutions in place. Take, for example, Gray Powell, the Apple employee who lost his iPhone 4 demo / prototype in a San Jose area bar. It took Apple actually a number of weeks to be able to figure out that they needed to wipe that device, as opposed to being able to do that on the fly as soon as the device was reported stolen. Also, take the example of Mike Wise, a sports columnist for the Washington Post, who decided to play a joke on everybody by tweeting from his mobile device that he already had the scoop on the suspension that quarterback Ben Roethlisberger was going to have to face at the beginning of the 2011 season, 2010, pardon me. Or, for example, look at the court case that actually went all the way to the Supreme Court of Jeff Kwan versus the City of Ontario, California, where police officer Kwan was using his mobile device to send inappropriate text messages to his mistress using the device that was provided to him by the City of Ontario. Last but not least, you can also take into consideration the fact that the U.S. military's unmanned vehicles, these attack drones, were compromised by Al-Qaeda and Iraqi insurgents with a commercially available piece of software that only cost $35. These are just classic examples of how, had all these organizations had mobility management policies and solutions in place, they could have very easily prevented any of these occurrences and not have to suffer the financial implications and, of course, the security implications of these failures in their business processes. So the key takeaways from these last few slides is that at the Enterprise Mobility Foundation, we believe that security will be the leading motivator for mobile device management moving forward in 2011. Now, however, we will also strongly suggest to not confuse device management with mobility management. Device management is in fact only one of the 9 components of mobility management, and organizations need to be able to have visibility on all 9 components of that mobility management and not just focus, however, on the one component that is the gray area based upon all the definitions out there in the marketplace of device management. What is, however, black and white is that mobility management is a must for all organizations, regardless of industry, regardless of geography, regardless of size. Please consider it, in fact, kind of like an insurance for your mobility investments in terms of being able to understand the cost implications, the asset management, the inventory management, and of course the information management of all the information that is passing through those mobile devices. So to wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a couple of closing comments. First of all, mobile platform consolidation isn't here yet. There are too many major players, whether it's iOS, whether it's Android, whether it's BlackBerry, Windows Mobile or Windows Phone, Symbian, MeeGo, WebOS, the list goes on. There is no way to tell currently who the dominant platform will be in the enterprise space for mobility. Furthermore, mobile device form factors will only increase. We've obviously seen now that we're making an important transition in the marketplace from just having smartphones to having tablets or smart pads, but we're also going to see an emerging trend coming forward of other kinds of form factors that will be leveraging a mobile OS. Additionally, we'll see more and more mobile applications finding themselves on non-corporate liable or corporate sanctioned devices, and these may have ultimately an impact on the infrastructure management and the security of the data that is being accessed on those devices from a corporate perspective. And that's why we believe that mobile security and mobility management will be absolutely paramount moving forward for 2011. Now, mind you, with all these different things going on, it can feel a little daunting, and what we're here to tell you today is that mobility management actually does not need to be complicated. There are a number of different solutions out there, whether on-premise or cloud-based, that can actually help you automate and simplify the process of managing the various mobile devices that are going to be entering your workplace. And the key here, the linchpin if you will be the mobility policies that your organization will be creating moving forward. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time today. Should you be interested in these and other topics at the Enterprise Mobility Forum, you can see where you can access them from the various links provided below. Additionally, we always invite you to become the latest member of the largest and fastest growing enterprise mobility social network, the Enterprise Mobility Forum, at www.theemf.org.
Philippe, thanks very much for joining us today. The information was really valuable and timely. I also wanted to thank you for all your hard work at the Enterprise Mobility Forum. It's a great resource for those of us in the industry. So thanks for joining, and thanks for your hard work at the EMF. One last bit of business, then we'll end the event. One of the key takeaways of Philippe's talk this afternoon was the importance of mobile security and mobile device management, and I wanted to make sure everyone knew about FiberLink's MAS 360 for mobile devices service. It is a cloud-based service for securing and managing your mobile devices, iOS and Android, and it's available today. You see a screenshot here of our homepage, www.mas360.com. If you click on the red button there labeled Get Started, you can find out more information, and you can actually sign up for a free trial. It's a very quick process, and within about 15 minutes you'd be able to manage your iOS or Android devices through our free trial through MAS 360 for mobile devices. So I hope you can try that out and find out a little bit more about